Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Go ahead and like, share with your friends, and subscribe. I trudged through the polished corridors of Larkspur Holdings, clipboard in hand, a quiet weight settling on my shoulders. I had been there almost 2 decades, witnessing the evolution of the company, feeling the pulse of contracts that were the lifeblood of every major acquisition we undertook. My expertise wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of skill that flashed in boardrooms with PowerPoint slides or digital dashboards. But every agreement, every indemnity, every single signature, those were my domain. I knew where each paper rested, who had initiated it, who had crossed out a clause that might later come back to bite us. And I was proud of it. I believed in it. It made me indispensable, or so I thought. Then came Ryan, the new general counsel. He arrived with a slick briefcase, perfectly pressed suits, and an enthusiasm for digitization that made my heart sink. "Paper's archaic, Lila," he said the first day he walked into my office. "We're moving into the future. Everything will be digital. Contracts will live in the cloud. Physical files? Burn them." I forced a polite smile, nodding, though my stomach churned. I'd grown up in the tangible world of contracts, where one misplaced page could cost millions. I'd seen it happen once, and I wasn't about to let it happen again. I tried to reason with him. "Ryan, the originals matter. Page numbers, initials, physical amendments. They're not just paper. They're proof. You can't just upload a PDF and expect it to hold the same weight in court." He waved me off, impatient, his eyes gleaming with conviction. "Lila, we're a modern company now. You're holding us back. Trust me, this is progress." I knew then that my years of experience, my meticulous record-keeping, were invisible to him. The very thing that had kept Larkspur safe during tricky acquisitions now made me a relic in his eyes. Weeks passed and the tension grew. Every time I approached Ryan with concerns about missing signatures or inconsistencies, he would brush me aside. "We'll handle it digitally," he'd say, tapping on his tablet with smug assurance. My colleagues started avoiding me. Whispered comments floated through the office. "Lila's just stuck in the past. Why is she even here?" The isolation wasn't just professional, it felt personal. Every morning I'd wake with the same knot of anxiety, wondering how soon I'd be dismissed like outdated software. Despite the shifting winds, I kept my head down and worked, ensuring that every physical contract was intact, every amendment filed correctly. But the boardroom started to favor Ryan's digital presentations. He dazzled them with cloud-based tracking and automated alerts. I could see the admiration in their eyes, the subtle nods, the excited murmurs. And yet, I knew the cracks in the system that no one else saw. Page numbers out of sequence, missing initials, a digital signature that didn't match the original. It was a house of cards, and Ryan was proud of it. The breaking point came during a meeting about the Sentinel Holdings acquisition, a $90 million deal that was the crown jewel of Larkspur's portfolio. I presented my review of the physical contract, highlighting the zoning indemnity clause on page 42, pointing out subtle annotations that could protect the company from potential liabilities. Ryan smirked, tapping on his tablet, showing a perfectly formatted PDF. "Lila, the system shows everything is here. Trust the technology. You're overthinking." I clenched my fists under the table, but I kept my voice steady. Technology isn't a substitute for legal verification. The original documents are the ultimate safeguard. No one wanted to hear it. They nodded at Ryan, praised his initiative, and I felt my position eroding beneath me. My warnings became a nuisance rather than a necessity. Emails were ignored, requests for meetings went unanswered, and soon I was called into HR. "We appreciate your contributions, Lila," the HR manager said, avoiding my eyes, "but your role is being phased out. We're moving entirely digital, and we need people who align with that vision." I left the office that day with a mix of anger and disbelief. 19 years, and suddenly I was disposable. The betrayal stung, but I didn't let it show. Not yet. As I packed my office, I quietly collected the documents I knew could never be fully digitized. Page 42 of the Sentinel contract, the amendments, the signed letters of indemnity, they were mine to protect. My employment contract had a clause allowing me to retain legally valid originals in the case of departmental transitions. I wasn't going to be caught unprepared, and I wasn't going to let the company fail because of negligence I had warned them about. As Ryan waved goodbye, confident in his digital triumph, I smiled softly to myself. He didn't know that the real power wasn't in the cloud. It was in the pages I held, in the details only experience could preserve. I walked out of Larkspur's doors with my head held high, but a fire had been lit inside me. I didn't just feel wronged. I felt the anticipation of watching justice unfold in its own time. Ryan's confidence would be his undoing. I knew it. The company's reliance on digital systems, without understanding the nuances of paper, would leave cracks too wide to ignore. And I would be waiting, ready to step back in with the leverage they had dismissed. Even on the streets outside, as I carried my briefcase filled with years of legal diligence, I replayed every conversation, every dismissal, every eye that had looked past me as if I were invisible. I remembered the trust placed in me by previous boards, the contracts I had meticulously checked, the amendments no one else noticed. It was a quiet power, one that required patience and timing. I would bide my time, and when the right moment came, the value of what I held would become undeniable. I thought about the upcoming acquisitions, the presentations Ryan would lead, the digital dashboards that made him feel invincible. They didn't understand that one missing page, one misfiled signature, could unravel even the most meticulously planned deals. And as much as the world celebrated speed and efficiency, I knew precision had its own currency, one that Ryan had ignored at his peril. The sun set over the city skyline as I made my way home that evening, the weight of my briefcase matched by the sense of calm resolve in my mind. They had dismissed me as archaic. They had laughed at my methods. But I held the key to the one thing they couldn't replace: certainty, accountability, and the irrefutable proof that experience, not technology alone, safeguarded their multi-million-dollar ambitions. Leaving Larkspur Holdings felt strangely liberating, even with the sting of betrayal still fresh. I didn't rush home that day. I walked through the streets with a sense of calm that surprised me. Every step was a reminder that I was no longer constrained by the dismissive glances, the whispers of colleagues, or the smug confidence of Ryan. I carried with me not just my belongings, but the culmination of years of careful, painstaking work. The original contracts, the amendments, and most importantly, page 42 of the Sentinel Holdings acquisition. That page was the linchpin, the indemnity clause that could make or break the $90 million deal, and I held it as both shield and leverage. Back at my apartment, I carefully organized the documents. I reviewed each contract, annotating them silently in my mind. Every initial, every marginal note, every signature was a thread in the web I had maintained for years. Ryan and his digital dashboards wouldn't see the cracks, the subtle anomalies, the little legal details that only paper could preserve. I allowed myself a small, quiet satisfaction as I realized that the company's rush into a paperless world would inevitably lead them into the very pitfalls I had warned them about. I didn't act out of spite. I acted with precision, like a chess player who had anticipated moves years in advance. The days following my departure were peaceful, yet I stayed vigilant. I knew that sooner or later, the gap between their digital system and the physical truth would emerge. And when it did, I would be in control of the resolution. I didn't answer the company's calls or emails immediately. I let them stew in uncertainty, feeling the absence of the institutional memory that had once been mine. I imagined the confusion in the boardroom, the frantic searches for documents that were no longer accessible, and a quiet thrill ran through me. They had underestimated the tangible, and I held the tangible in my hands. Meanwhile, news of problems with the digital migration started to trickle in through industry contacts. Minor errors first. A missing signature here, a misfiled amendment there. But soon the cracks widened. When I heard that page 42, the zoning indemnity crucial to the Sentinel deal, was missing from the digital system, I knew the moment I had prepared for had arrived. Ryan and his team panicked. The buyer's legal counsel threatened to void the acquisition outright, citing the absence of the signed clause. I watched from a distance as the company scrambled, realizing too late that the digital system, no matter how sleek, could not replace years of experience, diligence, and attention to detail. I didn't rush to call them. I let the gravity of their situation settle over them. The emails began to pour in, desperate and increasingly frantic, addressed to me by name. I read them with an almost academic curiosity, noting the shift in tone from condescending to pleading. My mind remained calm. I had anticipated every eventuality, every contingency, and I knew that the balance of power had shifted entirely. I reached out to my lawyer to formalize what I had already known. I would negotiate a consulting agreement that reflected not just my expertise, but the leverage I now held. The negotiation was careful and deliberate. I demanded a consulting salary 3 times my previous pay, full reinstatement of benefits, and most importantly, sole custodianship over all pre-digital physical documentation. The company had no choice. Ryan's errors had exposed them to massive financial risk, and the only person who could rectify it was me. I remained composed throughout the discussions, aware of the quiet tension on the other side of the table. Every nod, every concession they made was a testament to their realization that my expertise was invaluable. Once the agreement was signed, I returned to Larkspur Holdings with a quiet confidence that I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer the dismissed employee. They were now beholden to my knowledge, my precision, and my judgment. As I walked through the familiar hallways, I observed the subtle changes. The digital displays, the team working frantically to correct mistakes, the look of desperation in Ryan's eyes. It was a different atmosphere than the one I had left behind. Power once overlooked had shifted in my favor. Delivering the documents was a deliberate, almost ceremonial act. I placed page 42 on Ryan's desk with a calm smile. "Here it is," I said softly, letting the weight of my tone linger in the room. The silence that followed was palpable. Every executive in the room understood the implication. The deal could now proceed, but only because I chose to intervene. I felt a quiet vindication settle over me. A sense of justice achieved not through anger, but through calculated patience. With the Sentinel contract complete, the company could breathe again. The buyer's legal team accepted the documents, and the acquisition moved forward. But the victory was deeper than saving a deal. It was the affirmation that experience, diligence, and a respect for process could never be replaced entirely by technology. Ryan had learned the hard way that shortcuts and digital bravado could not substitute for years of knowledge and meticulous care. I, on the other hand, had orchestrated the resolution from the shadows, proving the enduring value of what others had dismissed as outdated. As I settled back into my role, now as a consultant with authority over all physical documentation, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about retribution, it was about recognition. The company had finally recognized my worth, but more than that, they had learned to respect the frameworks that supported their success. I had remained silent when dismissed, but I had acted strategically, ensuring that when the time came, the outcome would honor the work I had done and the integrity I had maintained. Even in casual conversations with colleagues, I noticed the change. My warnings were now met with attentive nods rather than dismissive shrugs. People consulted me before making decisions, acknowledging that the tangible knowledge I possessed was irreplaceable. It was not just my victory. It was a shift in culture, a recognition that experience and precision mattered as much as innovation and speed. The lessons of that period would echo long after the Sentinel deal closed, reminding everyone that there is value in what endures, in the paper, in the details, in the human expertise that technology cannot replicate. Looking back, I realized that every moment of marginalization, every dismissal, had been an opportunity to prepare, to anticipate, and to act when the moment was right. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and labeled archaic, but in the quiet spaces where I maintained control, I had preserved the keys to resolution. When the company faltered, I was the one who held the solution. The power of strategic silence had become clear. Sometimes, the most effective form of influence is patience, foresight, and the courage to wait for the precise moment to act. Returning to Larkspur Holdings as a consultant was surreal. The office that had once felt cold and dismissive now seemed to shift around me, acknowledging a presence that had been invisible but was now unavoidable. The corridors, the familiar hum of computers, the soft buzz of printers, they all reminded me of the world I had mastered, the quiet kingdom of paper and ink that Ryan had thought irrelevant. I walked with calm assurance, fully aware that every eye in the room was now observing me not as a relic, but as the indispensable keeper of truth. I made my way to Ryan's office, carrying the carefully preserved Sentinel contract, every page intact. When I placed page 42, the zoning indemnity clause, on his desk, the shift in the room's energy was palpable. Ryan looked up, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and embarrassment crossing his features. "Lila," he stammered, words failing him. I let a quiet pause stretch, allowing him to absorb the fact that the deal, the $90 million acquisition, now depended entirely on me. The realization hit the executives assembled in the room simultaneously. They had underestimated the depth of knowledge and foresight I possessed, and now the power dynamic had reversed. With calm authority, I outlined the discrepancies I had anticipated in the digital migration, highlighting the exact points where technology had failed. The executives listened, some nodding with shame, others with relief. I explained how every amendment, every signature, every original page mattered, and how reliance on digital systems alone had exposed the company to risk. My words were precise, deliberate, carrying the weight of 2 decades of experience. For the first time, Ryan heard me fully, not as a critic of his ideas, but as a guide essential to the survival of the deal. After delivering the documents, I suggested a phased integration process to ensure the integrity of all acquisitions going forward. The company agreed immediately. I would oversee the physical and digital alignment, ensuring no critical document was ever lost again. It was more than vindication. It was a complete affirmation of the system I had built, the diligence I had maintained, and the foresight that had preserved the company from disaster. Every gesture, every page I touched, now commanded respect. The quiet power I had cultivated in silence had manifested fully in authority and recognition. Ryan's position could no longer be maintained. His failure to understand the necessity of paper-based validation had cost the company time, money, and credibility. By the next week, the board made the decision that many had quietly anticipated. Ryan was relieved of his duties. I observed the proceedings with detached satisfaction, knowing that the outcome was not driven by malice, but by the undeniable truth of expertise that had been ignored. His departure was a testament to the lesson I had silently imparted. Experience and meticulous record-keeping cannot be supplanted by digital bravado alone. As the weeks progressed, my role solidified. I was no longer just a consultant. I was the custodian of the company's institutional memory, the guardian of contracts that define the company's integrity and security. Every executive understood that decisions required my input, that no deal, acquisition, or amendment could proceed without my verification. It was a quiet power, but a profound one, rooted in knowledge and foresight rather than intimidation. I had transformed my marginalization into an irreplaceable position, proving that the overlooked and undervalued could become central to a company's success. The Sentinel deal proceeded without further incident. The buyer's legal team accepted the documents, the indemnity clauses were validated, and the $90 million acquisition was successfully finalized. Watching the deal close, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not merely for the financial triumph, but for the affirmation of prudence, patience, and strategic action. My approach had been methodical, my restraint deliberate, and the result undeniable. The company had learned, albeit the hard way, the irreplaceable value of experience tempered with diligence. Even in casual moments, colleagues sought my advice before signing documents or approving deals. I noticed subtle acknowledgments in conversations, grateful nods, and unspoken respect. They had seen what happens when expertise is dismissed, and were now keenly aware of the necessity of balancing innovation with the careful stewardship of knowledge. I had become the bridge between tradition and progress, the human element ensuring that technology did not replace judgment. It was a validation of years spent mastering the craft, and it carried a quiet, profound satisfaction that no digital system could replicate. The board eventually invited me to present a series of training sessions for incoming executives and legal staff. I shared insights into physical documentation, emphasizing the necessity of signatures, initials, and annotations. I explained the vulnerabilities of relying solely on digital migration and outlined the procedures I had put in place to prevent future crises. The reception was overwhelming. They listened, they questioned, and most importantly, they learned. What had once been considered archaic was now recognized as essential knowledge that protected the company from catastrophic risk. Through all of this, I realized that my personal triumph was entwined with a broader lesson. The value of experience cannot be diminished by trends or technology. Patience, preparation, and understanding the depth of one's role create power that is quiet yet unstoppable. My story became a cautionary tale within Larkspur, a narrative of diligence, strategic patience, and the profound impact of respecting expertise. The company had nearly faltered, but the crisis had cemented my in. Reflecting on the journey, I felt a quiet pride. My initial sidelining had been painful, but it had provided the opportunity to act with precision, timing, and strategy. By anticipating the failures of the digital migration, I had preserved the integrity of a major acquisition, redefined my position, and secured a future where my skills were respected beyond question. Ryan's dismissal was a reminder that overconfidence without knowledge can be costly, and my return illustrated that patience and careful planning are forms of power in their own right. Now, every time I walk the halls of Larkspur Holdings, I carry with me the memory of what was nearly lost and the knowledge of what I preserved. My authority is quiet but pervasive, ensuring that nothing is done without verification, that no critical detail is overlooked, and that the lessons of this ordeal resonate through the company's operations. I have become the living embodiment of the balance between tradition and innovation, proving that hard copies, meticulous record-keeping, and patient expertise remain indispensable, even in a digital world. For anyone listening, the lesson is clear. Do not underestimate the quiet diligence of those who understand the nuances of their craft. Modernization and technology are valuable, but they cannot replace experience, attention to detail, and the human insight that transforms data into certainty. My story is a testament to the power of strategic patience, careful preparation, and the enduring value of knowledge that others may overlook, but cannot ultimately succeed without. Moral lesson. The story of my journey at Larkspur Holdings is more than just a tale of vindication. It is a reminder that expertise, patience, and meticulous care have enduring power. In a world obsessed with speed, digital convenience, and flashy innovation, the quiet diligence of experience often goes unrecognized, until its absence becomes painfully clear. True authority comes from knowing your craft, anticipating challenges, and acting strategically when the moment is right. I waited, I observed, and I acted with purpose, and in doing so, I turned marginalization into influence. Mistakes are inevitable when systems are relied upon without understanding their limitations. Paperless solutions, technology, and efficiency are tools, not substitutes for human judgment. Valuing experience alongside innovation ensures that critical decisions are safe, accurate, and resilient. My story encourages patience, careful observation, and the courage to act when your expertise matters most. Recognize the value in the overlooked details, protect the knowledge that sustains success, and never let temporary dismissal cloud your long-term vision. Above all, respect those who understand the foundations of your endeavors. Experience may appear archaic, but it often carries the key to stability, safety, and triumph. Let my journey inspire you to preserve, anticipate, and act with precision, the true markers of enduring success. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and comment your perspective or key lessons learned.